Hi, everyone. I'm Jack, and welcome to our show. We're going to talk about how to stop worrying and live more joyfully.
Right.
Worry is something we all experience, but sometimes it can be a big problem. It can make us feel stressed and unhappy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elena. I'm glad to be here with you, Jack, to talk about this. Today, we're going to learn from some ancient philosophers called the Stoics. They have some really helpful ideas about how to worry less and enjoy life more. Even though they lived a long time ago, their ideas are still relevant today. They can help us with modern problems. We can use these ideas to feel calm and happy even when things are tough.
Yeah, that sounds great. So how can these Stoics help us worry less?
Well, one big idea is to study history.
History. How does that help with worry?
When we study history, we see that people have always had problems.
That's true.
We see that empires rise and fall and people face all kinds of challenges.
I guess that makes sense. Like, we're not the only ones who have problems.
Exactly. We can learn from the experiences of people who lived before us.
Like, what kinds of things?
We'll think about how people have dealt with pandemics in the past, or wars, or economic depressions.
Those were definitely tough times.
They were, but people found ways to survive and even thrive.
So we can find strength in their stories.
Right. And it can make us feel better to remember that we're not alone.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Right.
So studying history can help us to see the bigger picture.
It can, and it can also help us to appreciate the good things in our lives.
That's a great point. So what's another Stoic idea that can help us with worry?
Another important idea is to focus on what we can control.
Okay, I like that.
What we can control.
Right. There are many things in life that we can't control, like the weather.
Or the traffic.
Exactly. Or what other people think of us.
It's true. We can't control everything that happens to us.
But we can control how we react to those things. That's what the Stoics teach us.
So we always have a choice.
Yes. We can choose to react with anger or with peace.
I think this is an important idea. It means we have more power than we think.
Right. And when we focus on what we can control, we feel less like a victim. I like that. So we're not just at the mercy of our circumstances.
Exactly. We have the power to choose how we respond.
This is really helpful. I can see how this could help with worry.
Me too. And it can help us to feel more calm and peaceful.
But it can be hard to do this in the modern world, right? I mean, there's so many distractions. We're always connected to the internet.
That's true. It's easy to get caught up in all the noise.
And it's easy to worry about things that we can't control.
Yes. But the Stoic idea of focusing on what we can control can help us to stay grounded.
It's like creating a safe space in our minds.
Right. We can focus our energy on the things that we can actually change.
Like how we treat others.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how we spend our time.
And how we take care of ourselves.
Exactly. Those are all things that we have control over.
And when we focus on those things, we feel more empowered.
Right. We feel more capable of dealing with whatever life throws our way.
This reminds me of something Marcus Aurelius said. He said that we all love ourselves more than other people, but we care more about their opinion than our own.
I think that's so true. We often worry about what other people think of us.
And that worry can really hold us back.
It can, but the Stoics teach us to focus on our own values.
So what's important to me? What do I believe in?
Exactly, and let's live by those values. Let's not worry so much about what other people think.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
Because it means we don't need to seek approval from others all the time.
Right. We can be true to ourselves, and that can make us feel free and happy.
And it can help us to make good choices even when it's hard.
It's like Epictetus said, only the educated are free.
What did he mean by that?
He meant that we need to educate ourselves about our own minds and emotions.
So we can understand how they work.
Right? And then we can be free from worry.
I like that. So we've talked about studying history and focusing on what we can control. What's another Stoic principle that can help us overcome worry and live a more joyful life?
Another important idea is to focus on the present moment.
Okay, the present moment. What does that mean?
It means paying attention to what's happening right now.
Instead of thinking about the past or the future.
Exactly. Worry often comes from thinking about things that have already happened or things that might happen in the future.
Yeah, that's true. I do that all the time.
But the Stoics believed that the key to happiness is to be present in the moment.
So how do we do that? How do we stay focused on the present?
There's a practice that can help us to be more present. It's called mindfulness.
Mindfulness. I've heard of that.
Mindfulness is about paying attention to the present moment without judgment.
So we notice our thoughts and feelings, but we don't get caught up in them.
Exactly. We just observe them. We notice or senses what we see, hear, and feel.
Okay, so we're not trying to push away our thoughts and feelings. We're just noticing them.
Right. And when we practice mindfulness regularly, we can learn to be present even when things are difficult.
So it's like training our minds to be calm and focused.
Exactly. It helps us to step out of the cycle of worry.
So we can find a sense of peace even when things are tough.
Right. And that peace comes from being present in the moment.
I like that. It's like we're creating a little oasis of peace in the midst of all the chaos.
That's a great way to put it. And the more we practice mindfulness, the easier it becomes to find that peace.
Okay, so how do we actually practice mindfulness? Are there any specific techniques we can try?
There are many different mindfulness techniques. One simple technique is to focus on your breath.
Just pay attention to my breath.
Yes. You can do this for a few minutes each day, or you can even do it for a few breaths whenever you feel stressed.
I'm definitely going to try that. It sounds really simple.
It is, and it can be very effective.
Are there any other techniques?
Another technique is to engage in a mindful activity.
What does that mean?
It means doing something that you do regularly, but doing it with full attention.
Okay, so like what?
It could be anything, like walking, eating, or even washing dishes.
So instead of letting my mind wander while I'm doing those things, I focus all my attention on what I'm doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You pay attention to the sensations. What do you see? What do you feel? What do you hear? I've never thought about doing those things mindfully.
Try it. You might be surprised at how much you enjoy these simple activities when you do them mindfully.
Okay, I will. It's like finding little moments of peace throughout the day.
Exactly. And the more we practice mindfulness in these small ways, the more it will become a part of our lives.
So it's a skill that we can develop over time.
Right. And the benefits of mindfulness are worth the effort.
It can help us to be more present. It can help us to worry less. And it can help us to find more joy in life.
Exactly. It's a powerful tool for creating a more peaceful and joyful life.
So we've explored how mindfulness can help us be more present. And we talked about how it connects to the Stoic idea of focusing on what we can control. But how does mindfulness help us deal with difficult emotions? What about feelings like fear or anger?
Mindfulness doesn't mean that we ignore our emotions. We don't try to push them away.
So we're not trying to pretend that we're not feeling them.
Right. We acknowledge them. We allow ourselves to feel them, but we don't let them control us.
So we're not suppressing our emotions, we're just observing them. Exactly. And when we observe them with mindfulness, they often lose their power over us.
It's like we're creating some space between ourselves and our emotions.
Exactly. It's like we're watching our emotions from a distance.
Instead of being caught up in them.
Right. And that distance can make a big difference. It can help us to feel less overwhelmed by our emotions.
So mindfulness isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about learning to manage our emotions.
Exactly. And it's a skill that we can all learn.
I like that. It means we don't have to be victims of our emotions.
Right. We can learn to respond to them in a healthy way.
So we've talked about how mindfulness can help us to be more present. And we've talked about how it can help us manage our emotions. Is there another way we can use mindfulness in our lives?
Yes, mindfulness can also help us to find more meaning and purpose in our daily activities.
Okay, so it's not just about being present in the moment. It's about bringing our full attention to whatever we're doing.
Exactly. Even the most simple tasks can become more enjoyable when we do them mindfully.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Think about making dinner. Instead of rushing through it while thinking about your to-do list, try to be present. Pay attention to the colors and smells of the food you're preparing. Notice the sounds of chopping vegetables or stirring a pot.
So I'm really focusing on the experience of cooking.
Yes, and you might even find that you enjoy the food more when you eat it because you were fully present while you were making it.
I like that. It's like I'm turning an ordinary activity into something special.
Exactly. And you can bring this mindful awareness to any activity. Taking a walk, listening to music, spending time with loved ones.
So it's about bringing that same quality of attention and intention to everything we do.
Exactly. And when we do that, we start to see that even the simplest moments can be filled with meaning and joy.
I like that. It's like we're finding the hidden beauty in everyday life.
Exactly. And that beauty is always there. We just need to open our eyes to see it.
I think Marcus Aurelius said something like that. He said,
Yeah.
Life is short. That's all there is to say. Get what you can from the present, thoughtfully, justly.
That's a beautiful quote. It really captures the essence of mindful living.
It's about making the most of each moment without dwelling on the past or worrying about the future.
Exactly. And that's a powerful way to live. It allows us to experience life more fully.
I like that. So mindfulness can help us to be more present. It can help us to manage our emotions, and it can help us to find more meaning and purpose in our daily lives. What's not to love about that?
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's a wonderful practice that can really transform our lives.
So, Elena, we've been talking about mindfulness and how it can help us to worry less. But what about those times when we're working towards long-term goals? How can we stay motivated and avoid getting bogged down by anxiety about the future?
Well, the Stoics had a concept for this. They called it living in a delayed return environment.
Delayed return environment, what's that mean?
It means that the actions we take today might not have results right away. We might have to wait weeks, months, or even years to see the benefits of our work.
So it's like planting a seed. You have to be patient and take care of it before you see it grow.
That's a great analogy. And it can be hard to be patient. We live in a world where we can get things quickly and easily, but some things take time, and that can be frustrating.
So how can we stay motivated when we're not seeing immediate results?
The Stoics suggest that we focus on the process, not just the outcome.
So instead of thinking all the time about the end goal, we should focus on taking small steps each day.
Exactly, and try to find some enjoyment in the process. If we only focus on the end goal, we might get discouraged.
It's about enjoying the journey, not just the destination.
Yes, and that makes life more enjoyable. We can appreciate each step we take, even the challenges.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this Stoic perspective on delayed gratification can be helpful. It's about shifting our focus from the future to the present.
Exactly, and when we do that, we can find more peace and happiness in the present moment.
Because we're not putting all our happiness on hold until we achieve some future goal. We're finding ways to be happy right now.
That's right, and that's a much more sustainable way to live.
So how can we practically apply this Stoic principle to our lives?
One way is to break down our big goals into smaller steps.
So instead of feeling overwhelmed by the size of our goal, we can focus on taking small, consistent actions each day.
Exactly, and we can celebrate our small wins along the way.
I like that. It's like giving ourselves a little pat on the back for each step we take.
Yes. And it's also important to connect our daily actions to our long-term goals.
So we can ask ourselves, how does this task contribute to my overall vision?
Exactly. And that can make even the most mundane tasks feel more meaningful.
I like that idea. It's like finding the hidden value in everything we do.
Right. And it can help us to feel more motivated and engaged in our work.
This reminds me of something Seneca said.
Yeah.
He said, hang on to your philosophical principles once they are fully considered as if they were divine commands. Do not allow any uproar to snatch them from you.
That's a great quote. It reminds us to stay true to our values even when things get tough.
It's like having an anchor that keeps us grounded when the storms of life are raging.
Exactly. Our values can provide us with stability and direction, especially when we're feeling lost or uncertain.
Okay, so we've explored how to find meaning and purpose in our daily actions, even when we're working towards long-term goals. What's another Stoic principle that can help us overcome worry and live more joyfully?
The Stoics also talked a lot about the importance of serving others.
Serving others, you mean like volunteering or helping people in need?
Yes. The Stoics believed that true happiness comes from helping others.
That's a beautiful idea. And it makes sense. When we're focused on helping others, we forget about our own problems for a while.
That's right. And serving others also helps us to see the world from a different perspective.
It helps us to become less self-centered and more compassionate.
Exactly. And when we shift our focus away from ourselves, we often find that our worries seem smaller.
I think Marcus Aurelius summed it up well. He said, what is not good for the swarm is not good for the bee.
That's a great analogy. It shows that we're all interconnected. What happens to one of us affects all of us.
So we're not just individuals. We're part of a larger whole. And serving others is good for everyone. It's good for the individual, and it's good for society.
That's right. And there's research that shows that helping others actually makes us happier and healthier.
That's amazing. It's like there's a scientific basis for this ancient wisdom.
It's true. Helping others isn't just a nice thing to do. It's actually good for us.
Okay, so how can we practically apply this Stoic principle of serving others to our lives?
There are countless ways to serve others. It doesn't have to be anything big or dramatic. It could be something as simple as helping a neighbor.
Or volunteering our time at a local charity.
Exactly. Or even just being kind and compassionate in our daily interactions with others.
So it's about finding small ways to make a positive difference in the lives of others.
Right. And those small acts of kindness can have a ripple effect. They can make the world a better place.
I love that. It's like planting seeds of goodness that can grow and spread.
Exactly. And the more we focus on serving others, the more we'll realize that true happiness comes from giving, not taking.
This reminds me of something Seneca said. He said, wherever there is a human being, we have an opportunity for kindness.
That's a beautiful quote. It reminds us that we always have a choice to be kind.
And that choice can make all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. Kindness has the power to transform not only our own lives, but also the lives of those around us.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of serving others, but how does this Stoic principle connect to overcoming worry?
When we're focused on helping others, we tend to shift our attention away from our own problems.
It's like taking a break from our own mental chatter.
Exactly. And that break can be very refreshing. It can give us a new perspective.
We might even realize that our worries aren't as big as we thought they were.
Right. And we might find that we have more energy and motivation to face our challenges.
Because we've tapped into a source of strength and purpose that's bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. And that's a powerful antidote to worry.
This reminds me of something Epictetus said. It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters.
That's a great quote. It highlights our power of choice. We can choose how we respond to any situation.
So even when things are tough, we can choose to react with kindness, compassion, and a desire to help others.
Exactly. And that choice can transform a potentially negative experience into a positive one.
Because we're not just reacting, we're actively choosing how we want to be in the world.
Right. And that's a recipe for a more joyful and meaningful life.
Elena, you've shared some really incredible insights today about how we can use Stoic principles to overcome worry and live more joyful lives. So as we wrap up this part of our conversation, what's one final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I would encourage everyone to think about how they can use these Stoic principles, not just to reduce their own worry, but also to create a more positive and interconnected world.
That's a beautiful challenge, Elena. It reminds us that we're all connected. Our actions have an impact on others.
Exactly, Jack. And when we live by Stoic principles, we realize that our well-being is connected to the well-being of others.
So it's not about me versus you. It's about us working together. We can create a world where everyone can thrive.
Right, Jack. And that's a vision worth striving for.
Elena, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insights with us today. I know our listeners will find your words incredibly helpful and inspiring.
It was my pleasure, Jack. Thanks for having me.
And to all our listeners out there, we encourage you to take these Stoic ideas and experiment with them in your own lives. See what works for you. How can you use these ancient principles to navigate modern life with more calm, clarity, and joy?
Until next time, take care, everyone, and keep exploring.
Bye for now.
You know, sometimes I think we worry too much. We make it a bigger problem than it needs to be.
What do you mean?
Well, we get so focused on every little detail of our worries,
Huh?
we kind of forget to look at the big picture.
Okay, so it's like we're in a forest and we're only looking at one tree.
Yeah, exactly. And when we do that, our worries can seem huge and overwhelming.
They feel so real.
Right. So how can we stop focusing on the little things? How can we see those worries in a more manageable way?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I'd like to know that too.
One helpful thing is to ask ourselves, what's the worst that could happen?
So we should imagine the worst possible scenario.
Yes. And you know, sometimes when we really think about it, we realize that the worst case scenario isn't actually that bad.
Or maybe we realize that we can handle it if it does happen.
Exactly. Even if the absolute worst thing happens, we still have choices. We can choose how we react.
So we're not powerless.
Right. We always have choices.
I like that. We can take back control of our minds and our emotions.
Yes. And when we face our fears, we realize that we are strong. We can handle whatever comes our way.
That makes sense. So we're not trying to pretend we don't have worries. We're just learning to deal with them in a healthy way.
Exactly. It's a much better way to live.
This makes me think of a story I heard about a man who was afraid of public speaking.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He had to give a presentation at work and he was so nervous he couldn't sleep.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. He decided to try this Stoic idea of facing the worst case scenario. So he asked himself, what's the worst that could happen?
Okay.
And he thought, maybe I'll forget everything I want to say. Maybe I'll make a fool of myself in front of everyone.
And what happened?
He realized that even if those things happened, his life would go on.
Right.
He would still have his job, his family, his friends.
It wouldn't be the end of the world?
Exactly.
Right.
So he went ahead and gave the presentation.
Good for him.
And you know what? He did a great job.
Wow, I'm so glad to hear that.
Me too. And afterwards he said that facing his fear had made him more confident.
I can understand why. He proved to himself that he could handle it.
Right. It's like he conquered his fear.
It's a very empowering feeling.
So we've talked about facing our fears. What's another way we can deal with those worries?
We can also try something called a stop-loss order on our worries.
A stop-loss order, is that like something from the stock market?
It is, but we can use the same idea with our worries.
Okay, how's that work?
Well, let's say you're worried about a job interview. You can give yourself a time limit for worrying.
A time limit.
Yes. You can say to yourself, I'm going to spend 1 hour preparing for this interview, and after that, I will not worry about it anymore.
Okay, so you're setting a boundary for your worry.
Exactly. You're not letting it take over your whole life.
I like that. It's like giving ourselves permission to stop worrying.
It is. And those boundaries can really help us to protect our mental health.
It can help us to feel more calm and peaceful.
Right. And that peace can make a big difference in our lives.
So we've talked about facing our fears and setting a stop-loss order. What else can we do to overcome worry?
The Stoics believed that it's important to learn from the past, but they also said we shouldn't dwell on it.
Okay, so we can learn from our mistakes, but we shouldn't keep replaying them in our minds over and over.
Exactly. Because when we think too much about the past, we can get stuck there. It can keep us from moving forward.
It can make us feel sad or regretful.
Yes, and it can also make us more likely to make the same mistakes again.
So how can we let go of the past and start fresh?
One important thing is to practice forgiveness.
Forgiveness. You mean forgiving ourselves?
Yes, we need to forgive ourselves for our mistakes.
And what about forgiving other people?
Yes, that's important too. Sometimes we hold on to anger and resentment towards others.
That can be really heavy to carry around.
It is, and it doesn't do us any good.
So how can we forgive?
Well, forgiveness is a process. It takes time. But it's important to remember that forgiveness is about letting go of the pain.
It's not about saying that what happened was okay.
Right. It's about choosing to move on.
And forgiveness can really help us to feel free.
It can. It's like we're releasing ourselves from the burden of the past.
So we've talked about forgiveness. What else can we do to stop dwelling on the past?
We can focus on learning from our mistakes. Instead of blaming ourselves, we can ask ourselves, what can I learn from this? How can I do better next time?
Yeah, that's a much more positive approach.
It is. And it can help us to grow and become better people.
So we talked about forgiveness. We talked about learning from our mistakes. Is there anything else we can do to let go of the past?
It's important to remember that worry often comes from our imagination.
What do you mean?
I mean, we often worry about things that might never happen.
Yeah, I've definitely done that before.
We all have. Our worries are often just stories that we tell ourselves.
So we don't have to believe those stories.
Right. We can question them. We can ask ourselves, is this worry based on reality? Or is it just my imagination running wild?
And if it's just my imagination, I can choose to let it go.
Exactly. You have the power to choose which thoughts you focus on.
That's really helpful. So how can we tell if our worries are real or just imagined?
One helpful technique is to use something called the law of averages.
The law of averages. What's that?
It basically means thinking about how likely something is to actually happen.
Okay.
For example, let's say you're worried about getting struck by lightning.
Okay.
Well, the chances of that happening are very, very small.
That's true.
So by using the law of averages, you can see that your worry is probably not realistic.
I see. It helps to put things in perspective.
Right. And sometimes we realize that we're worried about things that are incredibly unlikely to happen.
Which frees us up to focus on the things that really matter.
Exactly. We can focus our energy on things that are more likely to bring us joy and peace.
So we've talked about how to deal with worries that are based on things that might never happen. But what about worries that are based on real problems? What if we're facing a difficult situation that we can't just imagine away?
Well, the Stoics knew that life is full of challenges. And sometimes bad things happen that we can't control.
Like illness or natural disasters or job loss?
Yes, those are all difficult things to deal with. But the Stoics encouraged us to practice acceptance.
Acceptance. So like just giving up.
No, not giving up. It's about acknowledging reality. It's about stopping the fight against what is.
Okay, so it's about recognizing that we can't always change what happens to us, but we can change how we respond to it.
Exactly. And that's where our power lies.
So how can we practice acceptance when we're going through a hard time?
One helpful technique is to simply acknowledge what's happening. We can say to ourselves, this is happening.
Instead of saying, this shouldn't be happening, or why me?
Exactly. And that small change in our language can make a big difference in how we feel.
It helps us to move from a place of resistance to a place of acceptance.
Right. And once we accept what is, then we can start to think about our options. We can start to look for solutions.
So it's not about giving up. It's about finding a way forward.
Exactly. And acceptance can help us to do that from a place of peace and clarity.
That reminds me of a quote by Viktor Frankl. He said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way."
That's a powerful quote. It reminds us that even in the most difficult situations, we still have a choice.
We have a choice to find meaning, to find hope, and to keep going.
And that choice is what makes us human.
Elena, this has been a really helpful conversation about worry. But what if we're feeling really down? What if we're feeling discouraged or hopeless? Is there anything we can do to lift our spirits?
The Stoics had some great ideas about that, too. They really believed in the power of gratitude.
Gratitude, you mean like feeling thankful for the good things in our lives?
Exactly. It's about appreciating what we have instead of focusing on what we don't have.
So we're shifting our attention from the negative to the positive.
Right. And when we focus on the good things, it's hard to feel worried or unhappy at the same time.
I can see how that would work. So how can we practice gratitude? Do you have any tips?
One simple technique is to keep a gratitude journal.
A gratitude journal? What's that?
It's just a notebook where you write down a few things you're grateful for each day.
Okay, so I can write down anything big or small that makes me feel happy.
Exactly. The important thing is to focus on the good things in your life.
I've never tried that before, but I'm willing to give it a shot.
It's a very simple practice, but it can be really powerful.
So you're basically training your mind to look for the good instead of the bad.
Right. And when we do that, it changes our whole perspective. We start to see the world in a more positive light.
I like that. It's like we're putting on rose-colored glasses.
And the world looks a lot more beautiful when we're wearing those glasses.
We've talked about keeping a gratitude journal. What else can we do to cultivate gratitude?
Another helpful tip is to express our gratitude to other people.
So we can tell our friends and family how much we appreciate them.
Yes, when we express our gratitude to others, it makes everyone feel good.
It strengthens our relationships.
It does. And it also helps us to feel more connected to others.
And feeling connected is so important for our well-being.
It is. When we feel connected, we feel supported and loved.
And that can make all the difference in the world.
It really can. It can help us to feel more hopeful and more resilient.
Elena, this has been a great conversation about gratitude. I think it's a really important topic. But what about those times when we're feeling stuck? What if we feel like we don't know what to do? Are there any Stoic techniques that can help us to get unstuck and move forward?
Yes, the Stoics had some ideas about that too. One of their core beliefs was that action is the best cure for worry.
Action. So we should do something instead of just sitting around worrying about it.
Exactly. When we take action, even if it's a small step, it helps us to feel better.
It gives us a sense of control.
Right. We start to feel like we're not just helpless victims of our circumstances.
So we're taking charge of our lives.
Exactly. We're becoming active participants in our own destiny.
So how can we put this idea of taking action into practice? What can we do when we're feeling stuck?
One helpful technique is to break down a big problem into smaller steps.
Okay, so if we're feeling overwhelmed by the whole problem, we can just focus on one small thing at a time.
Right. And even if that first step seems tiny, it can create momentum. It can help us to get started.
It's like that old saying, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
That's right. And even if we don't know exactly where we're going, the important thing is to keep moving forward.
Because as long as we're moving, we're making progress.
And even if we make mistakes along the way, we can learn from them.
So we can adjust our course and keep going.
Exactly. And that's the key to overcoming any challenge.
This reminds me of something Winston Churchill said. He said, success is not, final failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts.
That's a great quote. It's about resilience. It's about never giving up.
And never giving up is essential for overcoming worry and achieving our goals.
It's true. And the good news is that we can all learn to be more resilient.
It's a skill we can develop.
Yes. And the more we practice it, the stronger we become.
So we've talked about facing our fears, setting boundaries for worry, learning from the past, practicing gratitude, and taking action. What's another Stoic principle that can help us to overcome worry and find more peace in our lives?
The Stoics also talked about the importance of rest and relaxation.
Rest and relaxation. That sounds nice. But isn't that kind of lazy?
It's not about being lazy. It's about taking care of ourselves. It's about recognizing that we can't always be on.
I think I need to hear more about this.
We need to give ourselves permission to rest and recharge.
So we can come back to our work and our lives with renewed energy.
Exactly. When we're tired and stressed, we're not at our best. We're more likely to make mistakes.
And we're more likely to feel overwhelmed and anxious.
Right. So taking breaks isn't a luxury. It's a necessity.
Okay, so how can we make rest and relaxation a regular part of our lives?
First of all, we need to make it a priority.
So we need to schedule time for relaxation, just like we schedule everything else.
Yes. We need to put it on our calendars and treat it like an important appointment.
And then we need to find activities that help us to relax.
Right. What works for one person might not work for another.
So it's about finding what works for you.
Exactly. Some people find that spending time in nature is very relaxing.
Yeah, I can see that.
Others prefer to read a book or take a hot bath or listen to music.
It's about finding what helps you to unwind and de-stress.
Exactly. And it's important to be fully present during those times of relaxation.
So we're not checking our phones or thinking about work.
Right. We're giving our minds and bodies a chance to rest and recharge.
So how can we incorporate more rest and relaxation into our daily lives? We can't always take a vacation or a long weekend.
Well, there are lots of little things we can do to de-stress throughout the day.
Like what?
Well, we can take a few deep breaths.
Just focus on our breathing for a few moments.
Exactly. That's a great way to calm our minds and bodies.
And we can do that anywhere, anytime.
Right. It's a very portable stress reliever.
I like that.
Yeah.
What else can we do to de-stress during the day?
We can also try moving our bodies.
So like going for a walk or doing some stretching?
Yes.
Yeah.
Physical activity is a great way to release stress and improve our mood.
And it doesn't have to be strenuous exercise. It could be as simple as taking the stairs instead of the elevator.
Exactly. The important thing is to find ways to move our bodies that we enjoy.
Because if we enjoy it, we're more likely to do it regularly.
Right. And consistency is key when it comes to managing stress.
Alina, this has been a really helpful conversation about rest and relaxation. But what about those times when we're feeling really anxious? Are there any Stoic techniques that can help us to calm down and find a sense of peace in those moments?
Yes. The Stoics believed in the power of reason.
Reason? You mean like thinking our way out of our worries?
Well, it's not always that easy, but it's about using our minds to challenge our fears.
Okay, so we can ask ourselves, is this fear really justified? Is there any evidence to support it?
Exactly. And often when we really examine our fears, we realize that they're not based on facts.
They're just based on our imagination.
Right. And our imagination can be a very powerful thing.
It can definitely make our worries seem much bigger than they really are.
It's like Seneca said, there are more things likely to frighten us than there are to crush us. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality.
That's so true. I think we often create our own suffering by worrying about things that might never happen.
It's a common human experience, but we don't have to be victims of our imagination.
We can use our reason to challenge our fears and put them in perspective.
Exactly. We can ask ourselves, what's the worst that could happen? And how likely is it to happen?
And often the answer is that the worst case scenario is not that bad, and the chances of it happening are very slim.
Right. So we can calm our minds and focus on the present moment.
That sounds a lot better than worrying all the time.
It definitely is. And it's a much more effective way to deal with our fears.
So we've talked about using reason to challenge our fears. But what about when our worries are really persistent? What if we can't seem to stop thinking about them?
In those cases, the Stoics recommended a technique called distraction.
Distraction. So we're basically trying to take our minds off our worry.
Exactly. It's about giving our minds a break from the constant chatter.
So it's like a mental vacation from our worries.
That's a good way to think about it. And sometimes when we come back from that break, we can see our problems in a new light.
So distraction can help us to gain perspective.
It can. And it can also help us to feel more relaxed and refreshed.
So what are some good ways to distract ourselves when we're feeling worried?
Anything that you enjoy and that engages your mind.
So like spending time with friends and family or pursuing a hobby.
Those are great examples. You could also listen to music, watch a funny movie, or read a book.
The important thing is to choose activities that make you feel good.
Exactly. We want to choose activities that are positive and uplifting.
So we're not just distracting ourselves from our worries. We're actively creating joy and peace in our lives.
That's a great way to put it. And when we do that, worry doesn't stand a chance.
So we've talked about using distraction to deal with worry. What about when we're feeling overwhelmed by our emotions? What if we feel like we're losing control?
The Stoics had a lot to say about self-control.
Self-control, is that like willpower?
It's similar to willpower, but it's more than that. It's about understanding our emotions and learning to manage them.
So instead of letting our emotions control us, we learn to control them.
Exactly. And that takes practice. Self-control is like a muscle. The more we use it, the stronger it gets.
So we're not born with self-control. We have to develop it over time.
That's right. But everyone can learn to be more self-controlled. It just takes effort and practice.
Okay, so how can we practice self-control?
Well, the first step is to become aware of our triggers.
Our triggers.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
I mean, the things that tend to set off our emotions. For example, some people get angry when they're stuck in traffic. Others get anxious when they have to speak in public.
Yeah, I definitely have my triggers.
We all do. And once we know what our triggers are, we can start to develop strategies for dealing with them.
So if I know that I get angry when I'm stuck in traffic, maybe I can avoid driving during rush hour.
That's a great idea. Or maybe you can listen to calming music in the car.
Or I can practice some deep breathing exercises.
Exactly. The point is to find what works for you.
And to remember that we're not always going to be perfect. We're all going to have moments when we lose our cool.
That's okay. The important thing is to keep practicing and to be kind to ourselves when we make mistakes.
So we don't beat ourselves up if we have a bad day.
Right. We just acknowledge it, learn from it, and move on.
So we've talked about using distraction and self-control to manage our emotions. But what about when we're feeling discouraged? What if we've experienced a setback and we're feeling like giving up?
In the situations, the Stoics recommended focusing on perspective.
Perspective. So like trying to see the situation in a different light.
Exactly. It's about changing our viewpoint so that we can see the bigger picture.
Because sometimes when we're feeling down, we can only see the negative.
Right. We get tunnel vision and we forget about all the good things in our lives.
So how can we change our perspective when we're feeling discouraged?
One helpful technique is to ask ourselves, what's good about this situation?
So we're looking for the silver lining.
Exactly. Even in difficult situations, there's usually something good to be found.
Like what?
Well, it could be something as simple as the fact that you're alive and healthy,
Oh, okay.
or it could be that you have loving friends and family.
Or that you have a roof over your head and food to eat.
Exactly. And when we start to focus on those good things, we start to feel better.
So we're shifting our attention from what's wrong to what's right.
Right. And that can make a big difference in our mood.
What else can we do to change our perspective?
We can also try comparing our current situation to something worse that we've experienced in the past.
So we're reminding ourselves that we've been through tough times before and we survived.
Exactly. And if we survived those times, we can survive this too.
It's like we're drawing strength from our past experiences.
Right. And it can help us to appreciate the good things in our present situation.
I like that. It's about putting things in perspective.
It is. And it's about remembering that no matter how bad things seem, they'll eventually get better.
So we just need to hang in there and keep going.
Exactly. And we don't have to do it alone. We can reach out to our friends and family for support.
So we've talked about finding the good things, comparing our situation to something worse, and looking for the silver lining. What else can we do to shift our perspective?
We can also try practicing acceptance.
Acceptance. Didn't we already talk about that?
We did talk about accepting difficult situations, but we can also practice acceptance with our thoughts and feelings.
Okay, so we can accept that we're feeling worried or scared or sad.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging our feelings without judgment.
So it's like saying, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now. And that's okay. It's normal to feel anxious sometimes.
Yes. And acceptance doesn't mean that we have to like our feelings. It just means that we're not going to resist them.
Because when we resist our feelings, we often make them stronger.
That's right. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder you push it down, the more forcefully it pops back up.
That's a great analogy.
When we accept our feelings, they often start to fade away on their own.
So acceptance is about letting go.
It is. It's about surrendering to what is.
So how can we practice acceptance with our thoughts and feelings?
One helpful technique is to simply observe them without judgment.
So we're not trying to change them or make them go away.
Right. We're just noticing them.
It's like we're watching them from a distance.
Exactly. And that distance can be very helpful. It can help us to see them more objectively.
We can see that our thoughts and feelings are not facts. They're just temporary events.
Exactly. And that realization can be very freeing.
So we've talked about practicing acceptance with our thoughts and feelings. What else can we do to find peace and clarity in our lives?
The Stoics believed that wisdom is essential for a good life.
Wisdom? You mean like reading a lot of books?
Reading can be a great way to gain wisdom, but it's also about seeking out mentors and role models.
So we can learn from people who have more experience than us.
Exactly. We can learn from their successes and their failures.
It's like having a guide to help us navigate the challenges of life.
Right. And seeking wisdom is a lifelong journey. There's always more to learn.
So we should always be open to new ideas and new perspectives.
That's right. The more we learn, the more we realize how much we don't know.
So it's a journey of discovery.
It is, and it's a journey that can bring us a lot of joy and fulfillment.
So how can we seek wisdom in our daily lives?
One simple way is to be curious.
Curious. You mean like asking questions and wanting to learn new things?
Exactly. Curiosity is the foundation of learning.
It's what motivates us to explore and grow.
Right. And when we're curious, we're more open to new possibilities. We're less likely to get stuck in our old ways of thinking.
So curiosity is a key ingredient for personal growth.
Absolutely. And it's something that we can cultivate at any age.
So it's never too late to start being curious.
That's right. And the more we learn, the more we realize how much there is to know.
So it's a never-ending adventure.
It is. And that's what makes it so exciting.
Elena, this has been a really insightful conversation about seeking wisdom. But what about those times when we're feeling lonely? What if we feel like we don't belong anywhere? Are there any Stoic principles that can help us to find a sense of connection?
The Stoics believed that community is essential for a good life.
Community. You mean like spending time with our friends and family?
Yes, friends and family are a very important part of community.
Yeah.
But it's also about finding groups and organizations that share our values.
So we can connect with people who are passionate about the same things that we are.
Exactly. And when we feel like we belong to a community, we feel supported and loved.
It's like having a tribe to help us through the ups and downs of life.
That's a great way to describe it. And community also gives us opportunities to help others.
So we're not just receiving support, we're also giving support.
Right. And that can be very rewarding.
So how can we find a community that's right for us?
Well, there are many different types of communities out there.
So we just need to find one that feels like a good fit for us.
Exactly. And once we find our community, it can make a big difference in our lives.
Elena, you've shared some really profound insights about seeking wisdom and finding community. But what about those times when we feel lost? What if we don't know what our purpose is? Are there any Stoic principles that can help us to find our way again?
The Stoics were big believers in self-reflection.
Self-reflection. You mean like taking some time to think about our lives and what's important to us?
Exactly. It's about getting to know ourselves better.
So it's like taking a journey into our own minds and hearts.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And when we take that journey, we can learn a lot about ourselves.
Like what?
Well, we can learn about our values, our strengths, and our weaknesses.
And we can learn about our passions and our purpose.
Exactly. And that knowledge can help us to make choices that are aligned with our true selves.
So how can we practice self-reflection? Do you have any suggestions?
There are many different ways to practice self-reflection. Some people find that journaling is helpful.
So they can write down their thoughts and feelings.
Yes, writing can be a very powerful tool for self-discovery.
It can help us to process our experiences and make sense of them.
Right. And it can also help us to track our progress and see how far we've come.
What else can we do to practice self-reflection?
Meditation is another great tool for self-reflection.
Okay, so meditation is about quieting the mind and focusing on the present moment.
Exactly. It's about letting go of all the thoughts and worries that are cluttering our minds.
So we can create space for stillness and clarity.
Right. And in that stillness, we can connect with our inner wisdom.
Our inner wisdom.
Yes. It's that voice inside of us that knows what's best for us.
It's like our intuition.
Exactly. And we can learn to trust that voice.
So self-reflection is about connecting with our true selves and learning to trust our intuition.
That's a great summary. And it's a powerful tool for creating a life that is meaningful and fulfilling.
Elena, you've shared some really profound insights about seeking wisdom, finding community, and practicing self-reflection. But what about those times when we feel overwhelmed by the complexities of life? Is there anything we can do to simplify our lives and find more peace?
The Stoics had some great advice about that too. They believed in the power of minimalism.
Minimalism? You mean like getting rid of all our stuff?
It can be about getting rid of material possessions, but it's also about simplifying our lives in other ways.
So we can focus on what's truly important.
Exactly. Minimalism is about letting go of the things that are weighing us down. It's about creating space for the things that matter.
So it's not just about material things. It's about simplifying our commitments, our schedules, our to-do lists.
That's right. It's about creating a life that is simple and meaningful.
I like that. It sounds really freeing. But how do we do it? Simplifying our lives can be really hard.
It can be, but it's worth the effort. A good place to start is by identifying the things that are most important to you.
Okay, so we can ask ourselves, what are my values? What do I really want to spend my time and energy on?
Exactly. And once you know what's truly important to you, you can start to let go of the things that don't align with your values.
So we can say no to commitments that drain our energy.
Right. And we can declutter our homes and simplify our schedules.
And maybe we can even simplify our thoughts.
Yes. We can practice mindfulness. We can focus on being present in the moment instead of worrying about the past or the future.
It sounds like minimalism is about creating a life that is intentional and fulfilling.
It is. It's about choosing to live in a way that supports our well-being.
So it's not about deprivation. It's about making choices that serve us.
Exactly. And minimalism is a journey. It's not about achieving some kind of perfect state of simplicity.
It's about finding what works for us.
That's right. And what works for one person might not work for another.
So we need to experiment and see what brings us peace and joy.
Exactly. There's no right or wrong way to do it.
Elena, you've shared some really insightful ideas about how to simplify our lives and find more peace. But what about those times when we feel disconnected? What if we feel like we've lost our sense of meaning and purpose? Are there any Stoic principles that can help us to reconnect with ourselves and with something larger than ourselves?
The Stoics believed that nature is a powerful source of wisdom and inspiration.
Nature. You mean like going for walks in the woods?
Yes, spending time in nature can be very restorative. It can help us to feel more grounded and connected to the world around us.
But it's not just about being in nature. It's also about appreciating the beauty and wonder of the natural world.
That's right. When we take the time to really see the natural world, we can't help but feel a sense of awe and wonder.
It's like we're getting a fresh perspective on our lives.
Exactly. Nature reminds us that we are part of something much bigger than ourselves.
And that our problems are actually pretty small in the grand scheme of things.
Right. When we connect with nature, our worries often seem to melt away.
So how can we incorporate more nature into our lives?
We can start by making it a priority.
So we can actually schedule time for nature, just like we schedule other important things.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be a big commitment.
Okay.
We can take a walk in the park. We can sit outside and enjoy the sunshine. We can even just bring a plant into our homes.
I like that. It's about finding small ways to connect with nature every day.
Right. And when we do that, we start to feel the benefits.
We feel more relaxed, more grounded, and more connected to the world around us.
Exactly. It's like nature is a source of energy and healing for us.
Elena, you've shared so many wonderful ideas about how to find peace and happiness in life. Yeah. But what about when we feel lost? What if we don't know what we're supposed to do with our lives? Are there any Stoic principles that can help us to find our purpose?
The Stoics believe that we should follow our hearts.
Follow our hearts. You mean do what we love.
Exactly. When we do what we love, it doesn't feel like work. It feels like play.
It's like we're in our element.
Right. We're doing what we were meant to do.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
But how do we figure out what we love? How do we find our passions?
Well, we can start by paying attention to what excites us,
Okay.
what makes us feel alive and engaged.
What are we naturally drawn to?
Yes. And we can also think about our skills and talents.
What are we good at?
Right. What comes easily to us.
And what do we enjoy doing, even if we're not good at it?
Exactly. It's important to be open to new experiences and to try new things.
Because we might discover passions that we never knew we had.
That's right. And it's also important to remember that our passions might change over time.
So what we're passionate about today might not be what we're passionate about 5 years from now.
Exactly. And that's okay. The important thing is to keep exploring and to keep following our hearts.
Elena, you've shared so much wisdom with us today. Thank you for helping us to understand how we can stop worrying and live more joyful lives.
It was my pleasure, Jack.
Yeah.
And remember, the Stoics believe that true happiness comes from living in harmony with nature.
That's a great reminder. Let's all go out there and embrace the beauty and wonder of life.
Yes. And let's try to live each day with gratitude and purpose.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this episode of our podcast. See you next time.
Goodbye.